Never thought about quitting or stopping.
What's the matter with you? I can't swim!
I don't want to be sitting in a rocking chair somewhere and go, oh, I should have, I could have.
I was just kind of wondering why your name and phone number were in the address books of two of the men arrested at Watergate.
At 88 years old, Robert Redford, the golden boy of New Hollywood, the man whose piercing blue eyes and measured silence defined an era, finally let his guard down. For decades, he remained Hollywood's great enigma. While others chased headlines and spilled secrets, Redford stayed disciplined, private, almost monastic in his refusal to play the fame game. But now, in what may be his most revealing moment yet, he's opened up about the people who truly mattered. Not just co-stars on a call sheet, not just names on a poster. These are the souls who shaped Redford's artistry, his humanity, and ultimately, his legacy. These aren't just the actors he worked with. They're the ones he loved. The ones who challenged him, changed him, and carved out the man behind the myth. You'll recognize some of the names immediately. Others will surprise you. And together they reveal something deeper about Redford himself, that beneath the cool exterior, there was always a heart searching for connection. To understand why this confession matters, you need to understand who Robert Redford has been to Hollywood. He wasn't just another handsome face in the 1960s. He became an institution, an actor, yes, but also a director who gave us ordinary people and a river runs through it, an activist who fought for environmental causes, and the founder of the Sundance Film Festival, which became the launchpad for independent cinema. But what made Redford different from his peers was his silence. While Marlon Brando courted controversy and Warren Beatty navigated tabloid romances, Redford kept his personal life sacred. He gave interviews sparingly. He avoided the gossip circuit. He let his work speak for itself, and when the work was done, he disappeared into the mountains of Utah. This wasn't arrogance. It was discipline. A kind of old-school Hollywood integrity that felt increasingly rare as the decades passed. Redford understood that mystique was power, and he guarded his carefully. So when a man like this, a man who built an entire career on measured restraint, finally opens up about the people who shaped him, it feels historic. It's a crack in the armor, a glimpse behind the curtain. Because when Redford names the 7 actors he loved, he's not just listing names. He's telling us who he really was when the cameras stopped rolling. These 7 names represent more than professional relationships. They represent partnership and rivalry, artistic fire and quiet dignity, vulnerability and ambition. Together, they form a map of Redford's inner life, the emotional and creative forces that turned a handsome kid from California into one of cinema's defining figures. This isn't a listicle, it's a revelation. If you want to understand Robert Redford, start with Paul Newman. Their friendship wasn't just Hollywood's greatest bromance, it was a creative partnership that defined an era and produced some of cinema's most beloved films. It began with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in 1969. On paper, it could have been a disaster. 2 leading men, both with big egos and bigger star power, forced to share the spotlight in a Western that was equal parts comedy and drama. But from the first day on set, something clicked. Newman brought humor and humility. Redford brought charm and restraint. Together they created magic that still sparkles today. The on-screen chemistry was so undeniable that audiences didn't just believe in Butch and Sundance's friendship, they felt it. The banter, the loyalty, the unspoken understanding between 2 outlaws facing certain death. It was all real because Newman and Redford genuinely liked each other. Then came The Sting in 1973. Reuniting them as con men in Depression-era Chicago. Once again, the magic was there. Newman's easy confidence complemented Redford's sly intelligence. They made it look effortless, but that effortlessness came from mutual respect and genuine affection. Off-screen, their friendship deepened. Newman was famously generous, giving away poker winnings to crew members, showing up early to help with setup, treating everyone from the director to the grip with equal dignity. Redford watched and learned. Newman taught him that stardom didn't have to mean narcissism, that success could be worn lightly. There were legendary pranks, too. Newman once filled Redford's trailer with popcorn. Redford retaliated by having Newman's Porsche cut in half and delivered back to him. These weren't petty games. They were expressions of a brotherhood that ran deep. The pranks continued for years, escalating in absurdity and creativity, each one a reminder that even Hollywood legends could maintain childlike joy in their friendship. But what Redford admired most was Newman's lack of ego. In an industry built on insecurity and competition, Newman seemed genuinely comfortable in his own skin. He didn't need to be the center of attention. He didn't need constant validation. He showed up, did the work, and went home to make salad dressing and race cars. Their friendship endured until Newman's death in 2008, spanning 4 decades of mutual support and understanding. In Newman's final years, Redford visited often, and they would sit together in comfortable silence, 2 old friends who no longer needed words to communicate everything. Years later, Redford would reflect, "Paul taught me to enjoy the life I was given, not to chase something that wasn't there, but to be present in the moment. He was the person who showed me that you could be a star without losing yourself." Without Newman, there might not have been the Redford we know. Newman gave him permission to stay human in an inhuman business. That's why he tops this list. Because he wasn't just a co-star, he was a compass pointing toward authenticity. When Robert Redford stepped onto the set of Out of Africa in 1985, he thought he knew what great acting looked like. Then he watched Meryl Streep work, and he realized he'd been looking at the foothills while she was climbing Everest. Streep's preparation was legendary. She learned Danish for the role of Karen Blixen. She studied the real woman's writing, her voice recordings, her photographs. She didn't just play Karen, she became her, down to the smallest gesture and inflection. Redford, who had always relied on intuition and natural charisma, found himself mesmerized by Streep's discipline. He compared watching her act to sculpting performance out of air, taking nothing and making it feel like everything. What struck him most was how she combined technical precision with emotional vulnerability. She knew exactly where the camera was, exactly how to modulate her voice for the scene, exactly when to hold back and when to let loose. But none of that technique felt mechanical. Every moment felt alive, spontaneous, real. Their relationship wasn't romantic, despite the love story they were portraying. It was artistic reverence. Redford saw in Streep something he'd always aspired to: the ability to disappear completely into a role while still maintaining your own artistic signature. During one particularly difficult scene, the famous "I had a farm in Africa" moment, Redford watched Streep find layers of grief, nostalgia, and acceptance all within a single line reading. He later admitted it was one of the most profound acting lessons he'd ever witnessed. Between takes, Streep would retreat into herself, finding the emotional truth again and again without ever seeming exhausted by the process, a stamina Redford found remarkable. "She showed me that truth on screen is worth more than anything else," Redford said. "More than good looks, more than charm, more than star power." Meryl's truth made everyone around her better. Streep's influence on Redford extended beyond that single film. She taught him that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the foundation of great art. In a career built on playing cool, confident men, Redford learned from Streep that the moments when you let the armor crack are the moments audiences remember forever. Her willingness to expose raw emotion, to risk looking unflattering or uncomfortable, gave Redford permission to explore deeper, more complex emotional territory in his later directorial work. Technically, Sidney Pollack wasn't an actor, at least not primarily. But Redford always put him in that category because Pollack understood performance at a level most actors never reach. Their collaboration began with This Property is Condemned in 1966 and blossomed into one of Hollywood's greatest director-actor partnerships. Together they made Jeremiah Johnson, The Way We Were, 3 Days of the Condor, The Electric Horseman, Out of Africa, and Havana, 7 films across 3 decades. But their relationship went far deeper than professional collaboration. They dined together, debated politics endlessly, shared life philosophies over wine and cigars. Pollack became Redford's artistic confidant, the person who could push him without breaking him. who could see potential in Redford that Redford couldn't yet see in himself. What made Pollack special was his ability to pull greatness from actors without ever forcing them. He didn't direct with an iron fist. He guided with gentle questions. What if you tried it this way? How would you feel in this moment? What's really happening beneath the surface? With Redford specifically, Pollack had an almost telepathic understanding. He knew when Redford was holding back, when he was playing it safe, when he needed to be challenged. And he knew how to coax out the vulnerability that Redford kept carefully hidden. Sidney understood me better than most people I've ever known, Redford reflected. He could look at me and know what I was thinking, what I was afraid of, what I was capable of. He saw through the movie star to the person underneath. Their creative partnership produced some of Hollywood's most sophisticated films. 3 Days of the Condor showed Redford could carry a paranoid thriller. Out of Africa proved he could hold his own in an epic romance. Each film pushed Redford into new territory. Pollack had an uncanny ability to match story to Redford's evolving maturity, choosing projects that challenged him at exactly the right moments in his career, never letting him become complacent or typecast. But beyond the films, Pollack gave Redford something invaluable: a creative home, a place where he could take risks, fail, succeed, and grow without judgment. In an industry built on fear and uncertainty, that kind of trust is priceless. When Pollack died in 2008, Redford lost more than a collaborator. He lost a brother, a mentor, a mirror. Their friendship was the true masterpiece of Redford's career, more lasting than any single film they made together. Redford gave a eulogy that was uncharacteristically emotional, his voice breaking as he described the man who knew him best. From Barefoot in the Park in 1967 to Our Souls at Night in 2017, Robert Redford and Jane Fonda's creative partnership spanned 5 decades, an almost unprecedented achievement in Hollywood. Every time they appeared on screen together, audiences believed their love stories completely. What made their chemistry so potent was the contrast. Redford was the cool, composed leading man. Fonda was fire and intelligence, refusing to play the traditional ingénue. In Barefoot in the Park, their first collaboration, she brought neurotic energy to balance his laid-back charm. The result was sparks. But what Redford admired most about Fonda wasn't her acting. It was her courage. While he stayed politically cautious, Fonda dove headfirst into activism. She protested the Vietnam War, championed feminism, and refused to compromise her principles for Hollywood approval. She was polarizing, controversial, and utterly fearless. Privately, Fonda challenged Redford in ways no one else did. She pushed him intellectually, questioned his choices, demanded he think bigger and bolder. Their conversations weren't gentle. They were debates, arguments, clashes of worldview. "Jane didn't let me coast," Redford admitted. "She made me sharper. She made me think harder about what I believed and why, and I loved her for it." Their reunion in Our Souls at Night felt like a gift to audiences who'd followed them for decades. Playing elderly neighbors who begin a late-life romance, they brought a lifetime of experience to roles that could have been sentimental but instead felt earned and real. Watching them together, you could see the decades of history between them. The films, the friendship, the mutual respect. Fonda remained as sharp and challenging as ever. Redford remained as measured and thoughtful. And together, they proved that some partnerships only deepen with time. The film became a meditation on aging, loneliness, and second chances, themes both actors inhabited with profound authenticity earned through years of living. Fonda showed Redford that art and activism could coexist, that staying silent wasn't the only form of integrity. She expanded his sense of what was possible, both on screen and in life. While Redford eventually found his activism through environmentalism and Sundance's support of independent voices, Fonda's example planted the seed that artists had responsibilities beyond entertainment. The making of All the President's Men in 1976 was, by all accounts, tense. Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman were playing Woodward and Bernstein, the journalists who broke Watergate, and their clashing methods created friction on set. Hoffman was method incarnate, obsessive, intense, constantly questioning every choice. He would do 20 takes to find the perfect moment. He lived in the character, refused to break, pushed everyone around him to their limits. Redford, by contrast, worked with calm precision. He prepared thoroughly but trusted his instincts. He didn't need endless takes. He knew what he wanted and delivered it efficiently. On set, the differences created real tension. Hoffman would challenge Redford's choices. Redford would bristle at Hoffman's intensity. Director Alan Pakula sometimes felt like a referee more than a filmmaker. But years later, Redford would confess that the tension was exactly what made the film great. Because Woodward and Bernstein weren't easy partners either. They were opposites forced together by circumstance, their different approaches creating friction that ultimately produced brilliant journalism. What Redford came to admire about Hoffman was his relentless pursuit of truth. Hoffman didn't care about being liked. He didn't care about being comfortable. He cared about getting it right, no matter how many takes it required or how many feathers he ruffled. We were opposites, Redford reflected, but opposites create sparks. Dustin made me better because he wouldn't let me settle. He pushed and pushed until we both found something neither of us could have found alone. Their dynamic perfectly mirrored Woodward and Bernstein, truth seekers in conflict, yet united by common purpose. The film succeeded because their real-life tension translated into on-screen authenticity. The scenes in the newsroom crackled with genuine friction, each actor bringing their distinct energy to create something greater than either could achieve separately. Hoffman taught Redford that discomfort could be productive, that challenging each other was a sign of respect, not hostility. In a career full of easy chemistry, Hoffman provided something different, the friction that creates fire. Looking back, Redford recognized that Hoffman's uncompromising approach had elevated his own performance, forcing him to dig deeper and work harder than he might have otherwise. The Way We Were in 1973 became one of Hollywood's defining romantic films, but Robert Redford initially dismissed it as too sentimental. He signed on reluctantly, skeptical of the material and uncertain about his chemistry with Barbra Streisand. But Streisand left a lasting mark on Redford, one he only acknowledged years later. What struck him was her ambition. Streisand didn't just want to be good, she wanted to be great. She approached every scene with the intensity of someone who refused to hear no. She fought for her character, questioned the director, demanded better material. She was uncompromising in a way that could have been insufferable, but instead felt like pure artistic hunger. Their chemistry on screen wasn't just scripted. It emerged from mutual admiration. Redford played the WASP golden boy who couldn't quite commit. Streisand played the Jewish activist who loved him despite his flaws. Their differences created romantic tension that felt real because, in many ways, it was. Redford admired Streisand's boldness. She didn't play by Hollywood's rules. She didn't soften herself to be more palatable. She brought her whole self: Brooklyn accent, unconventional looks, fierce intelligence, and dared audiences not to fall in love. Barbra made me believe in the power of pure romance, Redford later said. She committed so completely to the emotional truth of every moment that you couldn't help but be swept up in it. The film became a phenomenon, and that title song became iconic. Decades later, Redford admitted that Streisand taught him something important, that sentimentality isn't weakness when it comes from genuine feeling. That romance on screen requires complete vulnerability. Streisand's willingness to be emotionally raw, to cry real tears and expose real longing, showed Redford that holding back wasn't always strength. Sometimes it was just fear. Streisand wasn't afraid to want things: love, success, recognition. Redford, who'd built a career on playing men who held back, learned from her that sometimes the bravest thing is to reach for what you desire without apology. Her unapologetic ambition, once something that made him uncomfortable, became something he deeply respected as a form of artistic courage he wished he'd embraced earlier in his career. Robert Redford and Morgan Freeman rarely worked together, but Redford consistently spoke with reverence about Freeman's presence and power. What he admired was Freeman's quiet dignity. While others in Hollywood chased spectacle and volume, Freeman built a career on restraint. He rarely raised his voice. He never overplayed a moment. Yet when he appeared on screen, the entire room, on screen and off, paid attention. Freeman represented values Redford respected most: authenticity over artifice, substance over flash, moral authority earned through consistency rather than proclamation. When Morgan walks on screen, the world pays attention, Redford observed. That's power without force. That's the kind of presence you can't manufacture. Freeman embodied the quiet strength Redford had always tried to live by. In an industry that rewarded excess, Freeman proved that less could be more. His measured deliveries carried more weight than 1,000 shouted speeches. What Redford saw in Freeman was a reflection of his own values, the belief that true power comes from within, that dignity matters more than display, that the most compelling performances often come from what you don't do rather than what you do. Freeman's career was a masterclass in patience. He didn't become a star until his 50s, but when success came, it came because he'd spent decades honing his craft, never compromising, never selling out. Redford admired that trajectory. It mirrored his own belief that longevity matters more than flash, that real artistry compounds over time, that the most important audience is yourself. Freeman's late-blooming stardom validated Redford's own choices to prioritize substance over celebrity, to build slowly rather than burn bright and fade quickly. Though they worked together only occasionally, Freeman represented everything Redford valued about acting and about life: grace, restraint, authenticity, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing your worth without needing constant validation. In Freeman, Redford saw a kindred spirit, another man who understood that true presence requires no announcement, that the most powerful performances often whisper rather than shout. Look at these 7 names together, and you see the full picture of Robert Redford. Paul Newman gave him humor and generosity, the permission to be human despite fame. Meryl Streep showed him vulnerability and truth, that great acting requires exposing yourself completely. Sidney Pollack offered discipline and vision, a creative home where Redford could take risks. Jane Fonda brought fire and activism, the courage to stand for something beyond movies. Dustin Hoffman provided challenge and intensity, the friction that makes artists better. Barbra Streisand demonstrated ambition and romance, the power of wanting something without apology. Morgan Freeman embodied dignity and restraint, quiet strength that needs no announcement. Together, they explain Redford's evolution from the golden boy of the 1960s into the elder statesman of American cinema. They represent the forces that shaped him: partnership and rivalry, vulnerability and strength, discipline and passion. Without these 7, the Redford we know, Sundance founder, environmental activist, Oscar-winning director, Hollywood legend, would not exist. They carved him into something greater than a movie star. They made him an artist and, more importantly, a complete human being. Robert Redford's life has been carved into film reels, but his heart was carved by people. At 88, he finally revealed the names that shaped him, not just his career, but his soul. These 7 actors represent more than professional relationships. They're the map of his inner life, the forces that turned a handsome kid from California into one of cinema's defining figures. In the end, Redford's greatest performance might not be any single role. It might be the life he built, shaped by these 7 souls, each contributing something essential to the man behind the myth. Which of these names surprises you most? And what does it tell us about Redford's own legacy that the people he admired are the very ones who defined Hollywood itself? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's celebrate these legends together. In the end, Redford's greatest performance might not be any single role. It might be the life he built, shaped by these 7 souls, each contributing something essential to the man behind the myth.